Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McKusick. Tonight, without the great Josh Shiroka, our producer, but we are here with a friend of mine, Coach Evans. How you doing?
Doing fine. How are you?
Great to have you on. Always great to talk football with you. And I thought we'd talk about this absolutely awful game and see if talking about it together makes it any better, which it probably won't. First of all, Coach, let's get your particulars, Twitter handle, and your sip to tally.
Twitter handle is Coach Evans 9, and there you'll see a mix of Ravens talk and my 9 to 5 job, which is a high school coach. Sip to Tally on YouTube is pretty much all Ravens content, and that's where I post my film studies and breakdowns and things of that nature.
And that's SIP, S-I-P, the number 2, and then Tally, T-A-L-L-Y, if you want to find that. But it's great content, lots of great explanation, and from somebody who really understands the game in terms of the coaching background. That's why we're loving having him on this show as well. We don't love talking about this football game, but we're going to have to do it. We're going to have to take our medicine right now. And I don't know about you, but the game itself bothers me a little less than all the injuries. Boyle, Terrell Bonds, Williams, Humphrey. And I have to ask the question, will these define the Ravens season?
I think the length of Williams' injury and Campbell's injury are the two that concern me the most. Because it's not hard for anybody in the NFL to duplicate what the Patriots did. So having those two guys not in there, that concerns me a lot. And I hope they can get back in there before too much damage is done and we're out of contention.
Right. Me as well. I mean, obviously, the next 2 weeks they play Tennessee in a game that will have playoff implications. Then they play Pittsburgh on a short week in a game that has perhaps not playoff implications anymore. Honestly, it'll have playoff implications to the extent that it could be a loss for the Ravens, but I think they're unlikely to win the division at this point. Back 3. Still possible, but not impossible, but less likely.
Tough.
Yeah. Anyway, to me, the way the Steelers picked the Ravens apart when they had 3 good defensive backs and they were just picking on the 4th in that 4-corner dime bothered me a lot more that they may go into that game with only 2 good cornerbacks they can really rely on, or maybe 3, depending on the health of Jimmy Smith and whether Tramon Williams is still someone they can rely on. We didn't really see, I don't think, enough to decide from this game whether he's going to be okay.
Yeah, he didn't stand out to the point where anything negative happened, but obviously he's still getting his feet wet and trying to learn the system. But I don't think he did anything to cause us to lose the game based off what the Patriots did offensively.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he had 1 third down conversion against him. It honestly wasn't much. We'll get on to the rest of the show in a second, but I need to do a reader here from MyBookie, who's our favorite online bookmaker. So between the NFL, college ball, and the Major League playoffs, I think we're past that right now. There's no shortage of games to watch, and with thousands of lines available on all your favorite sports and events, you can turn your game into a payday with MyBookie. If you're the type of guy who likes to back big favorites, consider a parlay, and don't forget the underdogs. They have value as well. Game spreads, championship futures, and player prop bets. It's never too late to get in on the action and start turning your sports knowledge into actual cash in your wallet. Now, here's the big part. Sign up for MyBookie, and when you do, use our promo code, that's RAVENS, you know how to spell that, I hope, but it's RAVENS, to claim a deposit match, dollar for dollar, all the way up to $1,000. I've gambled for a number of years, and I have rarely found anything in the industry that's that good a matching proposition. And definitely, if you're gonna bet online, if you're gonna wager online, start with the advantage of a nice match right up front. It's a deposit designed to give you a little help, head start on your winning season. With stacked UFC cards, presidential prop bets, I think that might be shut down by now. All the major sports and more. Sign up today, and you can bet on whatever sporting events are now occurring, and do it through mybookie.com. And once again, that promo code is RAVENS to get the extra $1,000 match. All right, Coach. So back to this game. I think I'm not as concerned about the loss given the circumstances, and I'm talking about the losing the actual game, given the strength of their offensive line, how they were able to do it under the circumstances, the both arms tied behind their back that the Ravens had in this one. I'm much more concerned about the injuries.
Yes, I'm in agreement with you too. The fact that we actually had a chance to win the game at the end before the heavens opened up, I was tickled about that. But the injuries concern me because this was just one game. But those injuries could turn into 2, 3, 4 games.
Yeah, they could. And Boyle lost for the year. While there are some people who don't, would minimize the impact of Boyle, he's tremendously important to everything the Ravens do. If you just go through that game and watch the film, as we did when we looked at the offensive line, you just realize how play after play Boyle contributes something important to almost everything they do offensively. And it's hard for me to believe they're going to be able to go to the street now and find a guy, even if they can find a big tight end, who can contribute something as a blocker and something as a receiver the way Boyle does. And Boyle is one of the best blocking tight ends in the game. I think we'd agree.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. And not a bad receiving tight end. I mean, he's not a great receiving tight end, but he's not a bad receiving tight end.
Way better than last year. That's the area of his game I think he's improved the most on.
Yeah, I thought he looked great in the previous game to this one. And he had about 4 catches for 46 or something. But it was a good solid game. Had one very nice snatch of the ball, outreached, been playing well, and really making block after block in the run game, which is really the key for him.
And I really think his injury puts us down to one tight end, despite what they try to call
Ricard. Yeah, I agree. I don't think they've been kind of faking it all this season with only 2 tight ends on the roster and Ricard. I felt like they've needed that extra quickness they had with Hurst, not to mention the pair of hands, but the quickness to block in space that they don't have with Ricard. Ricard's great as exactly what he is, a 6th or 7th offensive lineman with Boyle also there. But they need to have a guy who can block in level 2 or level 3 more effectively, and that's not who Ricard is. They really need a guy who acts less like an offensive lineman in space, has the quick feet to match up, the way Boykin can, but at the tight end position.
Right. It's gonna be tough to find somebody that can put a combination of catching and blocking together the way Boyle did. And even if it was somebody out there, they probably wouldn't be ready by this next game. With the protocols and whatnot, they got to
They have to wait to bring him on. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have 2 guys on the practice squad right now. Xavier Grimble, who used to play for the Steelers, but he's been out for much of the year, so I don't think he's had a lot of practice time with the Ravens. And the other guy they have is Sean Culkin, who they've been protecting. So that I think he might be the next guy up. He's been in the league for a few years and has not had much in the way of catches during that period. But he probably gives you a little bit in terms of both receiving and blocking, but it's obviously going to be nothing near what Boyle was.
Yeah, I think it's going to force us to do some different things Sunday in the offense. Maybe some things that they're not comfortable doing, but got to try it and see.
Yeah, there you go. Do you think the Ravens are still likely to make the playoffs given how weak their schedule is down the stretch, or are you now concerned about it?
I think they're still likely to make the playoffs. I think splitting getting one of these 2 next games, or even both of them, puts us in definitely in there, unless we have a huge letdown versus one of those 3 or 4 remaining teams. But this is the big stretch right here, that Patriots game, which you probably wouldn't have thought at first. But then you come back with the Titans and the undefeated Steelers on Thanksgiving. This is a stretch where injuries are really going to rear their head, and we want to see what kind of coaches we got, in these next 2 weeks. Yeah,
I hope they can pull together a game plan to take care of the Steelers, which seems very difficult. But matching up against Tennessee, it's going to be the same kind of blunt force battle that it was here against the Patriots. And I don't think that plays well, particularly if Williams can't return this week. I mean, I almost think the Ravens have to be out calling DeMattePecco at this point, trying to figure out what kind of game shape he's in.
They got to do something because what we have in the middle, not strong enough to handle what's coming Sunday.
Yeah, it did not work. And Ellis played almost every snap after Williams left the game. I think it was 46 out of 51 or 46 out of 49, one of those two. Now, 46 out of 51 is correct. He had 56 real plays for the game, not including the kneels. He missed the first 5, and then he had to play 46. It's almost a career high in snaps for him, but it was way more than he was capable of, and we're going to get to a little bit of that, I think, later.
What and I couldn't find it when I looked at the film earlier. When exactly did Williams go out? Was it the first drive?
Yeah, 5th play of the game was his last.
Okay.
So he
I
played the
caught
first
myself
5
looking
plays.
for it earlier and I couldn't find it.
Yeah, it was a interesting game because the Ravens, obviously they didn't have Campbell and he's an Iron Man, but they activated 5 defensive linemen, which you think that's the right call because you know the Patriots are going to come with a lot of 21 personnel, which means tons of base defense the Ravens need to play. The Ravens have not in recent years played anything like the number of linemen per play they did in this game. And I don't even know how far back it is, but it hasn't happened during the last 3 years. But they played 2.61 defensive linemen per play. And, the Ravens are normally a nickel at most team that plays a lot of outside linebackers on the inside on passing downs where they have a lot of plays with 1, and they can have plays even with 0 defensive linemen on the field. But in this game, they used a lot of 3 and a lot of 2, and they averaged 2.61 for the game. And it's been years since they've had a game with that much defensive line usage. And then to be short a man and really only have 4 you're drawing from really leaves you very thin there.
Activating Ward may have helped a little bit, but I can understand the game plan going into it.
Yeah. Ward, a lot of people have been talking about him, but Ward really doesn't play on the inside unless it's a passing down for sure. That's the only time he puts his hand on the turf. Otherwise, he's a stand-up outside linebacker. So I'm not saying they couldn't have used him because they're stand-up outside linebackers. They really struggled to find the right combination of players. I think they finally did in the end. But I'm not sure how much Ward would have helped, unless you're talking about replacing Ward for Williams and missing Williams' 5 snaps, which they'd have to have, some sort of.
I'm just thinking of another body to try to throw in there, not because you don't want those guys getting all those snaps because once they get tired, they get moved a lot easier. Just as another body to try to keep the guys that were the primary run guys fresh.
Okay, so you're saying even if they had to go a little light on some snaps, that would have been better than trying to play all the guys 80% of the snaps, say, on the inside, some of those guys. Yes. All right, I'll buy that. That's
Either way it goes, just without Campbell and Williams, it wasn't a recipe for success for us.
Right.
What they were doing.
Right. They certainly leaned on the Ravens a lot in that game. We're going to have to talk about so many bad things today. We do want to hit on one thing before we forget about this is Martindale made a very smart play. I guess it came from Harbaugh originally, to have Clark intentionally jump off sides with 2:40 to go. So that would have been called in from the sidelines. He jumped off sides, he touched up, and then he jumped back, which is the right thing to do because if the guy doesn't move and the referee doesn't see the contact, you might give the offense a free play, and that's what you don't want to do there. But it's the second time since last December, the Ravens have used an intentional offside play, and I'll take people back. But last year at Buffalo, Singleton had a 38-yard run that took him down to the 2-yard line. They had the dime defense in the game at the time. And, of course, they didn't want to have 6 defensive backs on the field when they're defending at the 2-yard line because Buffalo's going to get real heavy with them and try and run the ball in. So they had Clark intentionally stand on the wrong side of the football, put his hand on Josh Allen. They got a neutral zone infraction called, and then they were able to substitute in their jumbo package. So it's kind of an interesting way. This one, it was all about clock management and basically conceding the 2nd and 2, which I think was probably the right call. But then, of course, didn't work out. They stopped them, and they got the ball too late anyway and too deep in their own territory.
And then the rain. The more rain.
Yeah.
It was already tough for Lamar to handle the ball, but that last little monsoon at the end made it almost impossible.
Yeah, that was a deluge. I'm thinking they got to pull the other team off the field at that point. In fact, I was almost thinking the Ravens need to take themselves off the field earlier in that game when I thought it was off. Whatever, that you're not allowed to do that. All right, so let's talk about some of this failure to stop the run in a little bit more detail because there were a lot of reasons for it. It wasn't just the loss of Williams. I think that really towers over all the other reasons for it. But what really bothered me about this is how badly the Patriots mauled the Ravens' base package, particularly when that line became overworked.
Yep, I saw a lot of not having gap integrity. And then even when we did have gap integrity, we had guys trying to make tackles that weren't necessarily strong enough to make the tackle right then. There was a lot of falling forward going on. So we may get them for a yard or two gains, but by the time we get them on the ground, it's 4, 5, 6 yards.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking mainly Chuck Clark in some of those instances, and even Queen in some of them.
Queen was the big one I saw, but I'm not denying that it would be Clark too. Queen had a Harris's 12-yard run, had 8 yards after contact on it. That's a Q2 335 if you want to go back and look at it. Speaking to the listeners here, but they've it's one of those plays that, boy, you say this is where it's showing up that Patrick Queen doesn't really have the size to play inside linebacker when that kind of thing happens.
Exactly. He's and in my just Monday morning quarterback thoughts, it probably would have been better had they switched roles last night. Had Malik been the middle guy, or Boyd been the middle guy, but Boyd's a smaller guy too. Had Malik been the middle guy and let Queen and Boyd be the outside edge type linebackers. I mean, they were the other linebackers, so to speak, but let Queen be the A-gap guy.
Right. And you know what?
I mean, not Queen, I'm sorry, Malik.
Malik Harrison. In terms of body type and who those players are, that makes complete sense. Period. He is really Malik is really a 2-down Mike linebacker. He may someday be able to be a really good pass defender. We saw some evidence of that not being the case in this game, but he's a guy who really belongs in that Mike role. But the fact of the matter is that the Mike is the position that's on the field all the time, so they can't justify a first-round draft pick on Queen unless he's going to be a guy that you groom to be on the field all the time. The skills are probably there. He'll probably be able to carry 5 more pounds as time goes on, maybe even a little more than that as he gets a little older. He's got that great sideline-to-sideline speed, but boy, there's so many problems right now technically with his game. Fundamentally, the things he did wrong in this game were just they were broad. It was not just getting run over. It was not knowing where the right gap is or not filling properly. It was not advancing to fill as opposed to standing back and filling. It was a lot. It was more than just getting run over.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Certain times he was in the same gap as another, D lineman or whatnot, and that's where they hit. He was out of position on a number of occasions, and it don't take much for a linebacker to be out of position. One read step wrong, one step to the left too much, and either a lineman is up on you, or you're just not in position to make the tackle, especially with a runner like Harris that can run through arm tackles.
Right. Yeah, he's definitely a big guy and definitely proved some of that ability. I'm bothered by the inability to stay in a gap, and I'm probably more bothered by that because that gap discipline is also evident in his pass coverage failures, is that he's not able to stay in a zone properly. That's kind of consistent to my way of thinking of not being able to stay in a gap properly and just wanting to follow the ball.
That's where that speed is a detriment to him. He thinks he can get to any and everybody instead of being patient.
Yeah, there you go. Other problems involved in this, what do I want to even say about this? With poor play from both inside linebacker spots, because I didn't think Harrison had a good game either. In fact, he had just 2 tackles on a game where he was in for 33 run snaps. That's not supposed to happen for a weak side linebacker who's a trail guy, cleanup guy. You're supposed to have some cheap tackles, even if you don't make the first gap tackles.
And at least be the second guy getting there, at least. Yeah. And with them running inside as much as they did, there was plenty of opportunity for him to be the initial or at least the second guy getting there.
Right. A lot of caught in the wash in this game. The other thing about the failing to stop the run that really bothered me is the Ravens didn't really find the right combination of edge setters. And it has to do with wanting to have one of their Sam linebackers on the field all the time. That's number one. And the other one that I'm really bothered by is they feel the need to have Ngakoue on the field on way too many first and second downs. Ngakoue's not a run defender. Excuse me for one moment,
Okay.
please. Okay, there we go. Ngakwe's not a run defender. He's undersized for that role. He's a situational pass rusher, and there's no shame in that. I mean, he may want to play every down, but he's a guy who really should be in there for passing downs and not run downs. He wasn't unbelievably awful against the run in this game, but he wasn't who the Ravens needed him to be in terms of being able to hold that edge. He got fanned out a little bit too much, left open space in those gaps, and that obviously created problems. It was already too much of the guys at the line of scrimmage not holding their ground and allowing those guys to the second block off that double team to climb to level 2 too easily. So it focuses the need to have your edge setters right.
Most definitely. He's definitely undersized. He's a finesse pass rusher. So you definitely don't want him in there in heavy run situations. But I can understand throwing different bodies out there trying to see what they can give you, because we were just getting bled to death. And it wasn't even a slow bleed. They were just constantly gashing. And I can understand the panic, as so to speak, to just put somebody out there to see if they can do it, because it's at that point, you knew the game was going to be to the point where your offense wasn't going to, your offense is not built to just throw it like that. So you had to try to stop them by doing everything but throwing the kitchen sink. But I don't think we could have let them, the way we played at the end, I don't think we could have done that the entire game.
Okay, so you're talking about some of the run blitzing they did at the end, like sending Peters off the edge. And I agree with that. You know what did work, though, is they finally found the right guys, as Ferguson and McPhee were the edge setters that really made a difference. And just to give you a little bit of statistics from the game, when they had Ferguson in the game, I'm going to give you this to you right now, they rushed for an average of 3.9 yards per carry. So that's fine. You can do that. You just can't give up the larger numbers. And when they had McPhee in the game, only 2.9 yards per carry. So when they had them both in the game, they had the good run defending unit they needed. The problem is that's two rush linebackers, and that creates some coverage flexibility issues. Obviously, handcuffs your defenses, force you to either put a safety or a specific linebacker on a tight end. And by the way, they didn't hardly throw to the tight end the whole game.
All right.
But would you have difficulty arriving at that combination if you're Martindale? Would you have not wanted to give up that flexibility? Or in a game like this where it's, pouring cats and dogs anyway, would you say we got to stop the run first?
Yeah, most definitely, because I told somebody earlier, that's probably one of the few teams in the NFL with a receiving core as bad as ours. So running is the priority for them, and so we would have to stop it. So, just let them. I mean, we got decent DBs, the decent corners. Mm-hmm. And we got safeties. Let those guys play man until they show you that they can beat you.
Right, I agree, and it's a wet night. It's a lot of balls are getting dropped, period. But balls got to be thrown improperly eventually in that kind of a deluge too. Receivers slip more. Just more things go wrong in the process of a route. When something's going on like that. So I thought stopping the run was the obvious thing they needed to do, and obviously the one thing that the Ravens defense really depends on very often is turnovers, and there weren't any of those. There weren't any really blown opportunities by the Patriots in this game.
Right. And Cam I think he only had 4 incompletions.
Yeah, what is he, 13 or 17?
Something like that.
Yeah. All right. One other thing I thought that showed up a lot on these run plays was too many small on big losses. Now, what I mean by that is it's okay if your linebacker gets blocked by a guard moving up to level 2. It's not great, but it's okay. It's not okay when your defensive tackle gets blocked by a tight end. It's not okay when your outside linebacker gets blocked by a wide receiver. And there was way too much of that in this game. I have some specific notes in my article, but there was too much of that small on large losses. And in particular, their fullback had a big day of blocking pretty much everybody. He helped on double teams. He moved into level 2 and hit Harrison. I mean, he just, whatever they needed him to do, whatever key block they needed on runs, he seemed to be there most of the day.
And what really stood out to me in that situation, and I think it happened on this play, was Cam's touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
We had a receiver blocked down on an outside linebacker and nobody even had a chance. Like the guy that pulled for New England had nobody to block.
Yes, I remember that, thinking that exactly. I think it was Oweno who was just pulling from right tackle. And he's like, he just took a leisurely stroll into the end zone looking around for somebody, and Cam just danced in.
Yep.
Yeah, that was ugly.
And so it was instances like that throughout the game where guys that we feel like should win based off of positional, defensive end, outside linebackers shouldn't be continuously like blocked by receivers. Unless you're talking a massive guy, and I don't think Harry was the one making a bunch of those tackles because Harry is big.
Yeah, Harry and Jacoby Myers had some of the blocks. He's the one I kept noticing getting big ones, but Harry had some too. So maybe we shouldn't be too upset about it. I'm going to try and just get over this, I guess. Let's talk packages on this, because this is where I thought the Ravens had less variation than they did at any time this year. I don't think that's a question or not, but just to go through this a little bit, they had 10 men on the field on the third play of the game. It looked like to me, based on the snaps and the usage and whatnot, the Patriots were still in 21 personnel on the play, that Madubuike left the field and he wasn't supposed to. So, it's one of those situations where you really hate for that to happen. It just contributed another 7-yard gain on 1st and 10. That was one of, about 20 nails in the coffin in this game that they had in terms of good plays, but it kept them on the field for another set of downs there just by losing first down so badly. What do you do about that? How many times in high school have you guys had 10 men on the field for a play in the last couple of years, let's say?
Ooh, honestly, the problem will be more so having 12 than 10.
Mm-hmm.
We rarely have 10 on the field. The only way we may have 10 on the field if it's on like punt or something like that, one of the special teams. But as far as a regular defensive down, the problem is really having 12, and that's really not a problem for us because we kind of run the same 11 guys.
Okay.
We don't have a ton of sub packages.
Okay, so that's a good point there. Without sub packages, you probably lose a lot of the risk of that happening. So on punt, if you have somebody hurt and then the next punt comes up, your special teams coach really needs to know you're number 9 now, right?
Right. But in actuality, high school, that special teams coach is probably another position coach, and so he's trying to focus on both of those things at the same time, and they happen. They happen. Because the guy that goes out hurt probably is not as hurt as he led on to be initially, and runs back out there, and his backup runs back out there. That's where you end up with 12 like that. But as far as regular defense, it rarely happens because the only people that really sub for us is the D-line.
Okay. All right. Very interesting. All right. Great look into high school coaching there. Before we get started, if growing an e-commerce business is your focus, you'll need a platform that's focused on growth. That's where Klaviyo comes in. Klaviyo is the ultimate e-commerce marketing platform for online brands of all kinds and all sizes. Whether you're just getting started or running a well-known brand, it gives you everything you need to send memorable branded emails, text messages, and more so you can build strong relationships that keep your customers coming back. With flexible automations, powerful insights, and super precise targeting, Klaviyo is a faster way to turn great ideas into great customer experiences. That's why it's trusted by more than 40,000 brands like Living Proof, Huckberry, and 8 Sleep. In fact, on average, Klaviyo customers see a 41% increase in overall revenue within 5 months. Klaviyo scales with you, so you never have to switch. They support everything from garage startups to iconic billion-dollar brands. Want to learn more about how you can grow your brand with Klaviyo? Visit klaviyo.com/grow to get started with a free trial today. That's klaviyo.com/grow. Now, I mentioned the base package here. The Ravens played it 34 times in this game, which is an unbelievable amount for modern football. We're not talking 1974 anymore. This is 2020, last I checked. And 34 base packages was 20 was the previous high in any game, and that was against Cleveland in week 1. They've barely played 34 the whole year. I'd have to look up the exact number they played, but I'll tell you right now. Let's do it. The entire year, the Ravens have played 111 times with 4 defensive backs on the field. So they played a third of those in this game, even though this was the 9th game of the season. So they played much more than they would normally in a game. And a lot of the times otherwise they've played base defense, it's because the other team puts in a 6th offensive lineman. It's not because the other team is running 21 personnel. Mm-hmm. All right. Anyway, the base defense got run all over, 34 plays for 215 yards overall. That's 6.3, which might not be terrible if you were passing a lot, but they gave up 126 yards on 25 run plays. Now, Coach, you know how bad that is, but to give up over 5 yards a carry with your base defense in there and them doing nothing special other than 21 personnel, that's embarrassing.
It is. It's like I said earlier, those slow deaths. You can't stop. No matter what you do, you can't stop it because they're hitting on all cylinders. And it's almost like they got your number that day. Especially, it's that one drive that stands out to me is the drive they got the touchdown, but they missed the field goal on.
Right after the half when they drove down the field on 4 plays?
No, this was in the first half.
Okay.
They got when they went up 13-7. As a play caller, that was a thing of beauty. I hated seeing it happening to my team, but as a play caller, that drive was a thing of beauty. They had runs down the middle, which made us condense the defense. Then we bounced and they hit them on the outside, which made them spread back out. Then they hit them with some play action. It was just they hit them with a variation of things, and we really couldn't stop any of it.
Okay, that was the one that's finished off by Myers' touchdown pass to Burkhead.
I think so.
Okay, so that was an ugly play, ugly drive there. It was really a death of 1,000 cuts though, because they didn't have a 75-yard run that contributed to a 5-yard per play average. Their longest run of the day was 25 yards. So it's not like they had a bunch of those. The problem I have with it is the Ravens really never figured out how to turn it off for good for the game. They were running from start to finish. And the 11 runs of 7+ yards, those included 2 on their final meaningful drive. They had 2 8-yard runs. Mm-hmm. I look back to last year. You remember the San Francisco game, how frustrated we were about the edge defense in that game.
Yes.
And the thing about it was that they let that happen for 35 minutes, and it was Kittle and it was Juszczyk. So it's really like you're running against very much a Ravens offense, very good offensive line. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is the Ravens then stopped it, and they had no runs over 5 yards in the last 25 minutes by making a relatively simple change, moving Ward in and taking Ferguson out. By the way, Ferguson completely changed as a run defender since.
Yes.
But my point is that the Ravens were able to stop the bleeding in that game. They never figured out how to stop it in this game.
Question. Thinking back to that game, was Pierce or Williams in that game?
I will check for you.
The only reason I asked is because if we just change edge defenders, to stop it, that would be the big deal because they weren't running inside anyway. They were probably running B to C gap because while edge defenders weren't setting edges like they should. Which puts our linebackers and DBs in position to be out of position as far as cutbacks and things like that. Because that's all San Francisco did. They run stretch, and then when you overrun it, they cut it back.
Right. Williams and Pierce were both active for that game. So there's really little excuse. But, San Francisco with their bigger bodies with Juice and Kittle on the outside are a much more able outside run team. And the Ravens, obviously, they had problems at inside linebacker. We knew about those the whole year, basically. But they got less when they had Bynes and Fort. Right. But they really did not have the issues on the interior. They still were a very good run-stopping interior. The problems were on the edge.
Yep. And we had the edge guys last night. We just didn't have the interior.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Okay, let's keep going packages here. We'll get through this pretty quickly. They played 2 plays with jumbo nickel. One of those 2 was the 24-yard touchdown from Myers to Burkhead, so that didn't work out all that well. They played 0 rush nickel. Now, why would I even bring it up if they didn't do that? Well, the rush nickel is a 3 outside linebacker package where Board is in as a second inside linebacker, but as a proxy for the safety. Okay, so it's really more like you play that in a dime package situation. So now you see why it's important because the Ravens weren't generating situations regularly that created favorable down and distance situations for them. And they really only had a couple of those later in the game. They really did not have much of that through about the first 2.5 quarters of the football game.
It's, again, searching for straws. Trying to find something that works. And I honestly think he was searching for straws in that San Francisco game and just happened to find the right straw.
Mm-hmm. I've always been impressed with Martindale's ability to use the personnel he has and change the game plan to make things work. But this was a game where I think he was really out of any trump cards. He had a bunch of 3s and 4s in his hand, as far as and there just wasn't any way to play those cards into a winner. It's a shame. All right, race car nickel. This is the one package the Ravens used that they were able to get on the field, get some linemen off. The race car nickel, 1 defensive lineman, 1 inside linebacker, 4 outside linebackers. Each time the 1 inside linebacker was bored. Same set of 4 outside linebackers each time. 2 plays, 7 yards, got off the field both times on 3rd and 13 and 3rd and 10. So the problem wasn't getting off the field once they got to that point. The problem was getting any of those situations where the Patriots weren't really in a 3rd and short.
Right. It'd be interesting to know, and I know it's probably in the game book somewhere. What were their 3rd down, like their numbers, like how many 3rd and shorts they had, how many 3rd and longs they had.
I can tell you right now. How about that?
Okay.
Okay, so their 3rd downs for the game, I'll read them through to you. First quarter, on the very first drive, they had a 3rd and 4, and they had a 3rd and 6 when they got the touchdown. Then they had 3rd and 6 when they got sacked to get out of field goal range. So that worked out. Second drive, they had a 3rd and 3. Third drive, they had a 3rd and 2, a 3rd and 4. They didn't have any on the 4th drive. Beginning Q3, they had 4 straight first downs and scored. The next drive, they had a 3rd and 2, and let's see, incomplete on that play. Then they had a 3rd and 13 on the next drive. That's the first really long distance one. Then a 3rd and 1 and a 3rd and 10 where they finally got knocked off the field. Then the following drive, with their last one of the game, they had a 3rd and 3 that got converted, and then a 3rd and 7 where the Ravens stopped them on that run where Newton just kind of slid to the ground to give the ball back with about a minute left. So not a lot of long distance 3rd downs in there.
Not at all. Just trying to compute the numbers fast, you're probably averaging 3rd and 5, 35 and a half, somewhere up in there.
No, maybe less, but yeah, that's the right range.
And so, with that being said, as a play call, that's what you want.
Yeah,
that's what you want.
I agree.
3rd and 4, 3rd and 5. You know your whole playbook's open. You got play action. You can still run. If they too tight, you can hit the deep ball. You just got everything.
Yeah, I mean, very much like watching the 2019 Ravens play with a good offensive line, with good blockers at the other positions, and being able to bully you a little bit. And even 3rd and 6, if they're in the right spot on the field, that's not a non-running down, definitely.
Right. Exactly. Especially if you're across the 50.
Yep.
You're playing 4, and with our propensity to go for it on 4th down, you got extra down. That's an easy 3rd and 6. You run and get 4 or 5, and now you're sitting at 4th and 1, 4th and 2.
Yep. All right. Last package they used was a standard nickel. That was 17 times. So you see they're in base 34 times, standard nickel 17. Almost no variation in the 56 plays. That takes up 51 of them. They were effective in the standard nickel, and I basically think the Patriots did them a favor anytime they put a 3rd receiver on the field. Mm-hmm. 17 plays, 55 yards, 3.2 yards per play when they had the nickel in there.
Them putting a 3rd receiver in there definitely gave us the advantage because they had the advantage as far as O-line and tight end against our defensive front 6 or 7. And them taking a receiver out there and putting him, taking one of their power guys out definitely helped us out with the problems that we were having last night anyway.
Yeah, it's basically they took a fullback out and put a wide receiver in. That fullback was a key to a lot of their rushing offense, that's for sure. All right, let's talk about the pass rush a little bit. Now, we've got a few things to go here, but Newton and Myers combined, Myers, of course, had the touchdown pass, had ample time and space on 6 of 19 dropbacks, which is 32%. It's a little bit less than normal, but those are the passes that you really just need to make something happen on when you got that much time in the pocket. They did get rid of the ball quickly 5 other times. That was all Newton. So the Ravens really just had 8 pressure events in the game, and obviously there's not much that shows up on the box score for the Ravens in terms of sacks, quarterback hits.
Mm-hmm. I think Judon did get one, didn't he? 1 sack.
Judon got a sack, and they had 3 quarterback hits in total, and that includes the sack.
That's what Ngakwe was brought in for, but because of their 3rd downs being so short, he was kind of, to me, not useless, but not be able to get out there and do what he does.
Yeah, I agree completely. It really reduces his value when the Ravens can't get to third and short. But having Ngakoue on the field actually hurts your chance of getting to third and short also.
He shouldn't be in there, like you said earlier, first and second down. He should come, maybe second and long, he should come in, but definitely third pass situations, he should come in. But with us just trying to find a combination of guys, I understand why he was in there, because I saw him try to set the edge one time just by rolling and causing a pile. So
Yeah, he does that. Actually, that was one of the things I'm most proud of him for because he had pulling guard coming at him. And he's going to lose that battle. That's 100-pound, well, not 100-pound, but it's probably a 75-pound difference between him and a typical pulling guard. And if he gets hit, he's going to lose the battle. That's what Suggs would have done in the situation is he would go low to try and hit that pulling guard, create a pile, and then let somebody else make the tackle. So that's actually, I think that's the best thing he can do there. I did think, and maybe you could tell me how the high school game is, that it's technically illegal to cut block a pulling player.
Yep, in high school it is.
Okay, so
yes. But it still gets done sometimes. Yeah.
All right. So what else do we have to say about the pass rush here? I know there's some things I wanted to say here. I thought the play action was very successful. I don't think that's surprising at all, considering the run success that the Patriots had, that their play action worked.
That's simple. When you run the ball that well, which they were doing, their play action passes were wide open.
Mm-hmm.
Like Cam was throwing the ball and a defender wasn't even in the screen. And that's why his completion percentage was so high.
Right. I agree. The pass that really got to me was Izzo, who they never really use as part of the offense. He had one toss to him. He had a simple crossing route, but it was turn your back play action. Cam pretended to hand the ball off. I don't remember if it was to Harris or who it was. But Harrison and Queen both bit so far on that fake, there was no chance of them getting back. And it ended up being in Harrison's zone that ball dropped in for an easy 20-yard completion. So, bummer. And it's not really surprising that the play action would be effective under those circumstances.
Right. Because of that run right up the middle, it's just simple football. Football ain't as hard as people make it. If you can run the ball, you can run the ball successfully with dives and ISOs, which was they were doing. Everything else opens up. The complete, play action, like things that you probably didn't even plan on running, opens up. Because the routes that Myers was getting open on, and like a normal game, he wouldn't get open on our corners like that. But because they kind of had their eyes cutting toward that run, to maybe they had some kind of support, he was able to do some of the things and get away from some of them guys. I mean, it all set up by the play action. I mean, by the run.
Right. They really picked on those inside linebackers. Queen and Harrison both got picked on just tremendously in this game. It's not surprising they would try and do that. It's not inconsistent with what's been doing the previous weeks. I just think the game plan is really out there now how to go after the Ravens with your passing attack.
Yeah, but the thing is, you have to have the O-line to do that, and they do. The Ravens, I mean not the Ravens, the Patriots' strength, in my opinion, is their O-line and their DBs when they're healthy. The O-line and their DBs, and their O-line was way better than our D-line last night, especially with Campbell and Williams being out of there. And even if Williams had not been hurt, it still would have been tough. But they could have doubled him and then, solo blocked the other guy and still probably had problems. But we really needed both of those guys to be in there to kind of, neutralize that run game.
Right. I'd have felt better about it. I'd have felt better about the loss, period, if Williams hadn't got hurt, obviously. But if I'd have felt better about the loss had Williams been in there and they're splitting some snaps and we're still getting outclassed on the line. I guess that might tell us more about who the Ravens aren't if that had happened, but it still would have been maybe a better way to lose. But anyway, messy game, sloppy stuff. We'll talk a little bit more about the pass rush if you don't mind. The Ravens rushed 5+ on 14 of 19 pass rushes. Now, they didn't have a lot of chances to be aggressive in this game, but when they did rush the passer, when the Patriots actually passed, the Ravens tried to get after him, and that's 74% blitz rate, or the 5+ rush rate, was the highest of the season by a substantial margin.
Yeah, and it's still, trying to, and I think those blitzes were run blitzes. They were trying to, get run fits and not necessarily, get after the quarterback, because I think a lot of Cam's passes were play action. So I think those blitzes were basically run blitzes, and they end up, passing the ball it comes off as a straight blitz.
Okay, so they did have a fair number of blitzes from off the line of scrimmage. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. So they had 10 blitzes from off the line of scrimmage in just 19 passes, which is a very high rate. But I would buy that because a lot of the times Harrison was their most frequent guy to blitz from off the line of scrimmage. So as a run blitzer, he kind of makes sense to beat somebody in a gap when you're run blitzing.
Mm-hmm. And basically just to seal that gap up before the running back is able to get through it and get in that second level.
Or you maybe meet the fullback there too if you're 240-pound Harrison.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And make a pile. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. That makes a lot of sense. I hadn't really thought about that, but that really explains, I think, this high blitz rate. Because when I go over to stunts, they had 0 stunts in the game. And, they probably used it for a couple of reasons, I'm thinking. The one is they really wanted to control Newton with some controlled rush lanes to try and make sure they could take care of him if they needed to. Right. But I think the other thing is that just like the Colts last week, who had Rivers in the pocket, no one to fear running, they really wanted to control the screen game by not disadvantaging their players with a bunch of twists.
And I honestly think the defensive game plan for both teams should have been the same. Stop the run, make them beat you with the pass.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there was not a number one receiver nowhere in the area code for either team.
That's good.
So, my thing is stuff the box, make Cam beat you throwing, and obviously everybody in America wants to say, make Lamar beat you throwing too. So that should have been the game plan, the general game plan for both teams.
Right.
We just couldn't stop the run.
That's a great quote. That's going to be on the promo somewhere. There wasn't a number one receiver anywhere in the area code. All right. Yeah, the other thing I always talk about in terms of deceptive elements is drops of 2+, so simulated pressures. They only had 2 of those the whole game. It wasn't quite the lowest rate of the season, but it was the lowest number of the season. So they really only had 3 blitzes that were deceptive. And when they were being deceptive, it was all about blitzes. And I think I buy your explanation that that's primarily run blitzes we're talking about, or at least it makes a significant contribution to those 10.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what it is, because they knew they couldn't just line up. Well, we just couldn't just line up and stop them after that second drive when they realized that we found something. Because if you look at it, and I'm sure you have, the second drive for New England is completely different than the first drive. Completely different in terms of where they're trying to attack.
Interesting. I've got to go back and do that and make sure I'm caught up to date on that, just to look at the differences by drive. But I will take your word on that. Let's move on and talk about individual players. So this is a point in the show where why don't we just each start by picking one? You're the guest. Please take a player, and we'll talk about him and your thoughts.
I really expected, based off how the game ended up, for it to be a Harrison type of game. And you saw him flash as far as taking on blocks, certain times during the game. You could see the aggressiveness he had. But it just didn't show up in the stat sheet as far as tackles and things like that. And as far as impact on the game. Yeah, he'd take on a guy and blow him up, but it didn't impact the run. They still would get 6, 7, 8 yards behind him blowing an edge guy up. There was no one else to feel. And so, as I'm saying this, is probably an indictment on Queen then. As I'm saying and thinking about it, because Harrison is coming through, setting the edges or blowing things up, and then there's no one else there to feel and make the tackle. Even though I'm indicting Harrison, I think I'm indicting Queen on the slick.
Yeah, if on those run blitzes, you're saying if he's filling a gap, then there should have been someone else to make a tackle in another gap.
Yes.
And yeah, there were, I'm sure even in my article, which I spent a lot of time doing it, I really haven't found all of the reasons why it didn't work. But what I try and do is identify the key blocks and then try and figure out what common tendencies they had on those 11 plays. Okay. So I agree. It was not good gap discipline, period, out of Queen in this game, and probably out of the Ravens in general. But it's harder to have gap discipline also when the defensive line is getting pushed around by double teams with relative ease.
And one thing to defend Queen and Harrison, when the guys are getting double teamed into your lap, there's really nothing you can do as a linebacker.
Right. First of all, that gap integrity is gone if he's moved significantly from his starting spot.
Right. They were changing the line of scrimmage.
All right. Okay, so let me pick a different player. Harrison's a good one. I thought Matthew Judon, in terms of what he did against as a pass rusher, did a pretty good job. He had a tough assignment in Michael Oweno, who is a hell of a rookie, drafted very late. We don't need to go into more of this on this show, but I loved him relative to Bredesen in this draft, and I thought they got terrific value getting him. But Judon beat him to the outside once. And Judon also had a great inside move on a pulling guard, Tooney, which led to a pressure also. So he had a couple of nice pressures in this game, I thought. Didn't play the run that great. Didn't really play the edge to him.
A phantom flag, too.
Was that bad.
That was horrible. That was horrible. He just basically, walled the guy off and pushed him, and they called flag on that. And I think that was a big flag, too, because wasn't that third down?
Did it create a third down? It gave him 15 yards, so it's big in that respect anyway. I have to go back to where it was to really see. It's a tack-on penalty, so I'm not going to be able to find it easily. All right. Anyway, I'll get to it. Was it the fourth quarter? Did it happen?
I just remember it being a key situation. I thought I remember it being a key situation where we was finna get him off the field.
Right. Okay, it's in the third quarter at 8:35. So it's 2nd and 7. They just completed a pass for 8 yards, which was going to be a first down. But then this tacked on 15 and took them down to tacked on actually 7 yards. So instead of at the 14, they were at the 7 after the play.
Is that the drive, the 4-play drive? Because Peter.
No, it's the drive after the 4-play drive. They ended up settling for a field goal on the drive.
Gotcha. I think that was their last points, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That is correct. They went up 23-10 on that drive. All right. Anything else about Judon?
No, I'm good on Judon.
Okay. Who you got for your next guy?
Chuck Clark. Chuck Clark. As much as we love Chuck Clark for being the play caller and the IQ guy, he didn't have enough bricks in his pocket to fit in this game. Just didn't. He's in the right position to make plays, but they going 2-3 yards with him on his back or things like that. Or he has to take on the fullback, which not good for him because he's technically a safety.
Mm-hmm.
So, Chuck Clark is my next guy.
So he's one of the guys you would really point to as being a bad run defender in this game that really hurt the Ravens?
As far as his frame and his physical ability, I would say yes. But as far as being in the right spot and getting other guys lined up, no. And I think his only thing was physicality, and that's because they didn't have those guys to keep those O linemen from the second level. Those O linemen were getting to the second level almost at will, and he just can't get off of that. You're looking at a 300-pound guy on what's Chuck 210, 220.
Yeah, that's 210ish. Yeah,
that's not gonna work for him. And there's no knock on him as a football player. It's just the guys in front of him wouldn't get the job done.
All right. We went over the Clark intentional offsides, and I love the fact that they're able to communicate something to him quickly like that. I wouldn't have called Chuck's game terrible last night. I mean, there's just so much terrible to go around in that football game that he wouldn't be the guy I'd pick on. But that's okay. We're looking at different things, and I'm sure you're the bricks in the pocket thing is a great. It's like another great one, man.
Yeah, and I kind of trying. I got an idea of some of the guys that you're going to say, so I'm kind of trying to pick somebody different just for conversation's sake.
Oh, okay.
Sure. It's a lot of guys around that line of scrimmage that we can call out.
All right, well, I'll go to another one. I want to talk about Pernell McPhee because I thought he really did have a pretty damn good game. Set the edge effectively, and when they finally got to that combination of Ferguson and McPhee, they really had an edge-setting combo that worked. But McPhee himself contributed to 3 tackles, which were for short yardage. I forget if it was a 0, 1, and a 2 or a 0, 1, and a 1. But all 3 of the tackles he made were defensive wins, which is an important notation. But there are other times when he at least turned the edge where the Ravens were not getting that at all night from those edge setters otherwise.
Yeah, he that's what he does, and I think he's taking a role of helping Ferguson with that too, because Ferguson is vastly improved at that aspect right there.
Yeah,
Of his
completely
set.
agree.
But McPhee is a tough guy. Can give you some three technique and some five, and he did what he could. It's just it's when you don't have them guys in the middle, it's just tough. You can sit at the edge all day, and you don't have the girth to stop it from inside. It's tough. But as far as McPhee doing his job, I agree with you. He played a hell of a game, did what he needed to do to kind of set the edge, protect the edge, and especially once Ferguson got in, they were able to do that together.
Yeah, that was really the magic formula, and I guess it's two rush linebackers, and the Ravens are not used to giving up the coverage flexibility to do that. So just it was a hard combo for them to find. Your turn. Who else you want to talk about?
I can't put it on any of other the DBs because of the way they ran the ball, but and I want to say some of the younger guys, Matabike and Washington, but just that they're younger guys. They probably hadn't quite figured out the nuances of how to use their best attributes to go against other guys. To take what they're good at, maximize it to win at the line of scrimmage, because they're not gonna win with just straight brute strength. In the NFL, that's not gonna happen. Unless you're somebody like a Sue when he was younger, or a younger Fluker. You gotta have technique.
I mean, both those guys, both Matabike and Broderick Washington, also are in different ways finesse players. I mean, they're a little smaller than your typical defensive linemen are today. Matabike is right around 300. Washington's maybe 305 or something. He's definitely not nose tackle size.
Right.
And they're putting him in there as a 3 most of the time with Ellis at the 1.
And good old Ellis.
Yeah.
I'll let you talk about Ellis.
Frustrating game from him. I think, I'm glad that he was able to stand in there and do what he did in the game, which is basically play, eat up a ton of snaps. But he got moved, and it's bound to happen. It's a very subtle difference. I think a lot of people don't really recognize. I know you do, Coach, but the difference between holding your ground for an extra 0.3 or 0.4 of a second when you're facing a double team like that, and just being able to plant that leg and stay put, maybe the difference between that second player, that other guard or center, breaking off that block and going into level 2 and making another successful block.
Yes, it makes it easier. The hardest thing to do is if you're a one tech being double teamed, is to hold your ground. I know a lot of old school coaches teach when you get double teamed to just drop and grab grass and make a pile, which makes sense because now your linebacker is still free to feel or scrape or whatever he needs to do. But in our case last night, they were getting that double team 3 or 4 yards back. So by the time the linebacker triggered, all the other lineman has to do is basically step to the side. He's not actually having to go get the linebacker. He's just stepping to the side and walling them off, and now the back has a two-way go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you, in terms of the nose tackle and not getting moved, how do you coach that player to use his hands to help him stay put?
I think it's more so is of getting your shoulders turned and splitting it, and making it be a solo block. So basically getting your body between the double team, and basically giving your back to a guy, so where he really don't have a surface to move you, and then it turns into a one-on-one block where you're just trying to push the offensive lineman left or right, depending on which way the other guy is.
Okay, so I would have thought that in a sense, allowing yourself to be moved left or right would be generally a bad thing. I would think it'd be a great thing if you're trying to split a double team as a pass rusher. But if you're trying to penetrate on the run, and they have their own predefined gaps and they know how they're blocking it, the last thing I want to do is get moved left or right a good distance. But does this help you not get moved left or right?
Well, when I say move left or right, I'm not. This is like inches, not feet or yard. It's just enough so that guy can't push you backwards. That makes sense?
Sure.
Yeah, you don't want to go back toward the linebacker. You want to kind of maintain your gap, but give a couple feet so you can split that double team. I mean, because even though we're talking about it and it sounds like it take a while to happen, It all happens like that.
Mm-hmm.
It all happens like that. And you gotta first of all you gotta feel a double team. Then your body has to have muscle memory enough to try to rip through it and get your shoulders turning and get through it. And it's hard to do. Hard to do. Like the great ones are great at it, but a lot of people get double teamed on all levels. Because that is hard to do.
What about trying to dictate first contact by using the one arm longer than two? Does that work on trying to avoid a double team block, or are you then giving one guy your chest and the other guy your arm to block?
I think definitely one guy's gonna have your chest, and if the other guy's smart enough, he's basically gonna take your hip.
Mm-hmm.
He's gonna hit you with the hip and push you to that guy. So now that guy has two arms on you, and he can now climb to wherever he has to go if he has a secondary assignment.
Right.
With that other arm up, you're giving away your hip to take that shot. And I know a lot of coaches that teach just putting that shoulder pad on the hip and making sure the defender is taken over by one lineman, so the other lineman can then go on to a second level defender.
It's pure gold here. We love these kind of explanations on the show. Really appreciate it from somebody who teaches this on a daily basis. Thank you so much for that, Coach.
No problem.
Any other players? Because I got one more I want to hit on before we close out this segment.
Oh, you can go ahead.
Okay, it was very exciting to me, and things like this always get me going. When Geno Stone finally got in the ball game, and it didn't happen until the last two meaningful offensive snaps they had. But it looked like the Ravens had 10 on the field, and I go, who can the 10th be? Because we can't see him. And then I see Elliott pointing backwards, and I go, that's got to be Geno Stone. You can't see him on screen. but I said, that's got to be Geno Stone. Then you don't see him for the play. And then the next play, he lined up on the edge of the formation. You thought, he's got a blitz off the edge. And then they sent the running back out wide on that side. I think it was White on the play.
Uh-huh.
And then he had to square up against him and play him man-to-man. Off the line like that, and he did it. So he almost got his debut at corner and at free safety in the same game.
And that's what our DBs do. That's what our DBs do, with the exception of Peters. Our DBs play right around the line of scrimmage, and sometimes they blitz. And all Peters did at one time on a run blitz, but that's if you look at Marlon, that's what Marlon does.
Oh yeah,
Marlon's a linebacker, cornerback.
Do you think there's a chance that Stone right now is? Okay, we get to that point in the game and you don't put Levine in the game. That tells me they don't really trust Levine anymore as a on-field safety.
Right.
And they put Stone on at a point where they still needed to get the football back and try and win the ball game. To me, that tells me Stone should be the third safety whenever they're ready to go back to the dime package as a three safety look, because there isn't anybody else.
Right. I think behind Stone you got your practice squad guys, right?
Yeah, Stone is technically a practice squad call-up, but yes. So they called him up this week. It's actually only his first call-up because the first time he was actually a COVID call-up. Mm-hmm. So they got one more chance to bring him up. But I really hope this is a draft pick that they end up salvaging, because I still think the guy has the prospect for success at the NFL level, particularly with the way the Ravens have coached up safeties over the years.
Mm-hmm. Does he fit in the Chuck Clark mold, a kind of hybrid guy?
Well, that's what I hope. In an ideal world, he's a guy who can play special teams. That's Clark, a guy who can play in the box or deep. And I think what we're going to see more of with a guy like Stone is that he may not have the speed to play single high, and the Ravens like to play a lot of that, but he may be a good, when they want to go to cover two and they're protecting a lead, he'd be good for that. So and the other thing he'd be good at is playing a split role in the dime when they're deep. And that's usually it's in the dime that they play two deeper safeties. Sometimes they rush one, and maybe he'll have to be the rush guy more often than not when they do that. But I still think there's a place for Stone in this defense. And let me put it this way. If there's a place for Levine, who really his big ability now, or at least when he last played the dime well, was to play a short zone and really nothing else, never drop to a deep coverage area. I think that there's a place for Stone.
Most definitely, because Levine is definitely a circular space guy.
Yeah. Reads the quarterback still pretty well. I still like him as a player, but Stone is all kinds of opportunity to still be a ball player at this point.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I really appreciate the discussion, of course. Let's look at the mailbag and see what we have this week, because I want to make sure we hit on some of this. We got a couple of really good, interesting things coming out. The first was I know we'll miss Boyle blocking, but watching the game live, I knew if running right or left, depending on where he lined up, do you think that will help us to be less predictable? That comes from Shakiru.
I said earlier to some other guys, I think losing Boyle is going to almost force us to open up our offense, to use the receivers more in the passing game, because we don't have the bodies to run some of those sets that we love to run. We already was short a tight end, because last year we had 3 tight ends and Ricard. Now we have 1 tight end, Ricard. So it's going to force us to have to use Boykin, Snead, Duvernay. We're going to have to throw to those guys. And we're going to have to open the offense up more, because we don't have the personnel to be heavy run. Well, we have the personnel to be heavy run, but just not in those heavy sets.
Right. They're going to have to find some different way to do it. I honestly think they're going to need another tight end, because Andrews cannot take an inline role like that. So they really need another tight end with some real size if they're going to run the same playbook even.
I agree.
As they have with Boyle being a double team creator on the inside.
And I don't think we can run the same offense. We was already not running a lot of the plays that I can recall from last year, because we don't have the third tight end, because Ricard is not the athlete that Hurst was. So it's gonna be even cut back even more on those heavy sets. So it's gonna force, in my opinion, it's gonna force Wink to find creative ways to use Duvernay, Hollywood, Snead. Snead's been playing good lately. It's gonna force him to, I'm not Wink, I meant Giro, to use those guys.
All right, we got one more here. This is from Brad McGowan. Says, on last night's broadcast, NBC introduced the Ravens D with the players' PFF ratings. I really hate that, by the way. Collinsworth owns the company, but he now is getting the PFF ratings for everybody with the opening defensive introductions. And I was surprised to see nearly every Ravens front 7 player rated towards the bottom of the league. Judon and Queen were rated among the 5 worst at their respective positions.
Also, within that same framework, they did it for the Patriots O-line, which is a clip I have in my video, and all of them were in the top 10, with the exception of maybe the center.
Even they were all very highly ranked, and you know what? I'm after watching that game, I don't think they're wrong just from what we saw there. But having Judon among the 5 worst is kind of, I don't think that can possibly be true. Let me say this. I don't think it can possibly be fully reflective of what he contributes in pass defense for the Ravens, because his ability, his flexibility there is what drives a lot of the Ravens' scheme-driven pass rush. And that's been part of the Ravens' success this year, is being able to get after the quarterback until these last 3 games here.
Yeah, he's better in pass coverage than I thought. And I always complain when I see him out there in pass coverage, but he does a good job of playing his zone and taking care of guys when they come in his zone. Because to me, zone coverage is simply man while the guy's close to you, and he does a good job of playing those guys. Like with the penalty he got, that was a good job of playing man coverage while the guy was in his zone.
Yeah, what I kind of like about Judon is I like how he reacts to the play in front of him. I think he's good to react to that ball. He's got the most screen intuition of the current Ravens players, which is not to say he has a lot. None of them are Terrell Suggs. But he reacts well to the play in front of him. I don't know how well he reads the quarterback. I wouldn't put him real high in that category, and I don't think he really understands what's going on behind him in terms of route concepts. But he does know to drop, and usually laterally to a particular spot, and I think he takes away throws from the quarterback by doing that. All right,
that's his game in a nutshell, and that's why his value to us is more than just sacks. Even though we like to have sacks and we think sacks drives his money, his value to us is more than just sacks.
Yeah, it was interesting. I did the Know Your Foe episode of the Patriots guy, and I'm already fearful that both Bowser and Judon end up as Patriots next year. I mean, they're exactly the kind of versatile edge defenders who can drop to cover, rush the quarterback, create a scheme-dependent pass rush that Belichick would love to have.
Yep, I can see it. Even though I would hate to see it, but I definitely can see it.
All right. Well, Coach, thank you so much for joining us as always, but we'd love to hear anything you have to do. What are you working on currently in terms of projects?
Again, working on that drive that the Patriots had, the second quarter drive that I talked about earlier that I liked. I'm gonna kind of break that down and talk about how they hurt us with that. As far as the other projects, I don't know what I'm going to do this week because we're actually still in the playoffs, and so that kind of later on in the week that kind of takes my focus toward my actual real job.
I got to know more about that. So what round is it now for the playoffs down there?
This is round 2.
Okay.
We played our first round game Friday. We drove to Jacksonville, and we beat a team 64-0. We
Whoa.
had 420 some odd rushing yards, but
Wow.
they weren't very good. And the reason, normally you don't get a playoff game like that, but because of COVID, some schools in Florida opted not to play, so everybody that decided to play made the playoffs.
Oh, that's cool.
So that's that's what kind of why that happened. And that school had never made the playoffs in their 65-year history. That was their first ever playoff game.
Did you outweigh them very seriously?
Yes.
Yeah.
They had a bunch of midgets.
Big bunch of midgets.
We had a lot of 1 and 2 play drives. We threw the ball 3 times.
Okay.
We had a lot of 1 and 2 play drives.
Had some 50-yard runs sprinkled in there, I guess, huh?
Yeah, we did.
All right, well, that sounds great, Coach. I hope you guys can go a long way in that, and I want to hear about it, week after week. If you want to toss me a DM, or even better yet, if you'll just put it in normal Twitter, and we'll talk a little bit about it there. Also, make sure you send me the link to those videos. The coach videos, always pure gold. Make sure I get a link, and I'll let the other fans of the show know about it and where they can find it, because you definitely deserve to have more viewers. Let me say that.
I appreciate it. And for those that are going to go looking after this, it's Sip the Tally Films on YouTube. Twitter handle is Coach Evans9, and IG, which is not very much stuff over there, but it's a little bit. It's Sip the Tally also.
Okay, and that's SIP2, the number 2, and then TALLY, Sip to Tally. All right, outstanding stuff, Coach. Josh, we're here. He'd be plugging the Situation Room, which is our sister show that's also on FilmstudyBaltimore.com. Please give them a try. A couple great guys that really understand football and put out a show on Sunday night. So it's right after the game. It's the first thing you can listen to in terms of review on Film Study Baltimore. Gabe, excellent show, and make sure you give that a listen anyway. In terms of stuff coming up for the week, we have Mike Herndon we're expecting to have on the Know Your Foe episodes. That'll be good, and look forward to that. It'll come out on Thursday, and all the other normal shows and content. Otherwise, offensive line grading, everybody wants to see Ben Powers this week. That'll probably be out on Thursday, but the offensive show we'll record tomorrow night, and we'll have some discussion of Ben Powers on that. Coach, thanks again for joining us. We can't thank you enough. It's so cool to have you. We only get you 2 times per this year, and wish it were more.
Well, if somebody cancels, call me.
We'll do that. We'll do that, buddy. And we'll talk to you next time
I appreciate
on Film
you.
Study.
Thank you for having me.